opinion.
It's the classic teenager. Hi, Sosa. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
How's it going?
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, your hair looks good.
Thanks. How's it going, you guys?
It's going pretty well.
That's good.
Basically just chatting about how the older you get, you clue into consequences more for your actions, and the more afraid you become. So do you have any experiences that you'd like to share with us about that?
Yeah, there are definitely some things I did as a kid that honestly I don't even know if it's like legal to share.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, if it's not legal, you definitely should not share it, right?
Yeah, like I actually don't even know if it's like illegal either. Like I just don't know how appropriate it would be to share. I think one of the most significant ones was when it was one person who would have a car and they didn't want to make 2 trips, so you would have to like.
We're just gonna end the conversation right there.
you have to like sit on top of each other in the back seat or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So but we get the gist of what you mean. And definitely not the best behavior, but definitely that's what being a teenager entails. No ideas, Kara. But yeah, that's what being a teenager entails. You make terrible decisions, and I feel like you are grateful that you come out of that. But what?
Yeah, you just at the time, you just don't think. You just there's like an app that you just don't think, and you just do whatever you feel in the moment, and you don't think about the consequences, like was said before. So you just don't think, definitely.
But there's definitely like a lot of like impulse decisions that are made. It's just like needing that like satisfaction of whatever decision it is right in that moment. So I think a lot of the decisions we make as teenagers, they're very impulsive decisions. So we don't really have the time to think about what the consequences are. And even when we do think, like there is a lot of the times where I think, hey, like this is probably a bad decision, but because I just need to do this right now. So
plus I feel like there's that feeling of being immune to consequences, even though you've heard the stories over and over again of how it could have been wrong. You think mine's gonna be different, and of course we're lucky that ours was different, but sometimes you're not always that lucky. Do you get what I mean? Like you feel like, oh well, I'm gonna be different, like mine's not gonna be like that. But what's the guarantee that you have that your decision will have a different outcome, aside from being a teenager? And
I mean, we're definitely just figuring out the world at that point. It's not like we still aren't trying to figure out the world right now. I'm sure we can look back on our decisions now in 10 years from now or in 10 years and think, oh, why did I do that then?
Even a few months ago, like
exactly. So I feel like definitely being a teenager is you're definitely starting to just come into your own. But then also the world still kind of sees you as a kid, so it's a very like weird spot to be in.
More forgiving as well. Like your mistakes are more forgiving.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Are there? Because it's so funny. This is a funny topic that we're
not
talking
all
about right now.
Right?
Because not the ones that are long lasting. I actually had this conversation with Isosa last night, and I brought it up. I'm gonna spare you the details of the conversation, but basically it entailed, well, when we were teenagers, this is how you made me feel. And she was like, come on, man, like I was a teenager. Like, come on, you have to forgive me for that. But I was like, well, you made me feel that way. Like,
right, but I feel like you have to experience those bad things to grow, but there has to be a line of like, oh, that's way too bad, but at the time you don't think of it, but there has to be like that growth of that interest in doing things that are bad, but not to like say it's good, but like it helps you create your character in finding who you are. I believe I'm not no psychologist, but that's what personal experience. You just got to experience things. That's it.
That's really true.
And you do things.
Just to add to what Kaden said too.
You're right. Not all like mistakes made as a younger person mean they're more forgiving.
Yes.
Exactly. And just to add on to what Kaden said too, I feel like that's definitely a time in our lives where we're a lot more self-centered, and we kind of just, or I don't know, it's speaking from my perspective, like there's kind of the feeling of it was more about like my world at the time as opposed to like the external world. So like I wasn't really concerned, not consciously, I think this was more subconsciously. I wasn't as concerned with how my decisions affected the people around me.
Yes.
I mean, I did try to be cautious of it, but like looking back, a lot of decisions I made was to make myself feel better, or to make my, like, there were decisions of me trying to figure out who I was. So I wasn't really concerned with how those decisions were affecting the people around me at the time. But looking in back in hindsight, I do see that there were certain decisions that I made that if I were given the opportunity now, I wouldn't make those decisions. But again, like Kaden said, it's all part of growing up. We're at a time where we're really trying to figure out who we are. You know, we're trying to come into our own. So it's definitely, it's a difficult time for sure, right? Yeah.
And to add to what Dana said earlier, like it, like you said, mentioned, not all those decisions are forgiven, but I feel like the time where they are is when you realize those decisions and grow from it. Because there's some people who go into their adulthood still acting like the teenager that they were, and that's when you don't really forgive those decisions, because you're like, well, you should be older now, you should be wiser now, and you're still acting the same, right? And then me, Isosa and I had this discussion, like I brought back the other day when I was talking about, well, how you made me feel, and she had this deep reflection, and she's like, well, now you're kind of making me feel bad, like I didn't know I did those things. And I was like, well, yeah, you did do them, but you're different now. Like I feel like that was the tipping point for us, and to come to a resolution was that, well, you don't act that way anymore. But whereas if you still acted that way today, I would be like, well, you're still constantly doing that, I cannot forgive you for that, right? But that was like the forgiving point. And I'm just gonna give you guys an example, because I'm gonna leave the names out of the story, because I told Isosa the story yesterday, and she's like, oh, that, I thought it was worse than this, right? So we were invited to a birthday party, right? And I was invited to this birthday party, and I thought, okay, this is so funny, right? I thought I got ambushed to this party. And I thought, oh, I am actually invited to this party because I'm invited. So I go, and then basically they say to me, and I still, of course, was present at this party, and they say to me, they're like, okay, you're here to hang out with the celebrant's sister, right? Okay, what does that entail? You're here to hang out with the celebrant's sister, okay? Okay, great. You know, I get to hang out with her sister, because my thought was, oh, she's in the same grade as me, so that's basically we can hang out. So then me and I was hanging out with this, I'm just gonna call her Sharon, right? So I was hanging out with Sharon, and we decided to go join Isosa and the birthday girl downstairs for the party. And then all of a sudden they started getting mad at me, and they're like, you're supposed to keep Sharon out of the party, that's your job. That's why you're here, that's why you're this, that's what. Just
so I think from the birthday girl's perspective,
and lo and behold,
from the birthday girl's perspective,
okay,
it was kind of a coming of age party for her. Like it was kind of like her establishing herself in that kind of like teenage world / high school world.
To me. That was foreign to me at the time, because I'm like, well, you want to keep your own like sister out of the party, and then my own sister would ambush me like this, you know, like
what teenager at the time, and this is what we discussed yesterday, what teenager at the time wasn't trying to do things differently from their younger siblings, like at the time? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but
like,
it's like
your younger
from my perspective was, don't bring me to this party just to tell me that, okay, well, your job was to keep Sharon out of the party, you know, for instance. Or I'm like, and that's when I told Isosa, because obviously we're older now, we're wiser now. Now you would never make a call like that. As a teenager, you're more self-centered. You don't see the big deal in situations like that. But when you've reasoned a situation like that today, you're like, well, why would she bring you to that party just to keep someone else? Just tell me from the onset, like, oh, don't tell me when I get there thinking, oh, I'm invited to this party because I'm invited, and then get mad at me and say, well, your job here was to keep Sharon about, and then why are you even trying to keep Sharon out of the party in the first place? Like, you know, so that's the two things we weigh. But
are you still talking to them? Do you still know them? Do you bring that up, or like, is that
answer your question? We don't speak to these people anymore.
Yeah, we don't.
They actually moved from this city as well, and I think that was just a huge misunderstanding coming of age party. Like no one really wants like their younger sister to be at the party. It was my bad for, you know, bringing my sister to this party and then expecting her to, you know, like mingle with the younger sister, and we're like at the party.
You're gonna give me a job, you know?
So totally understand that. But again, speaks to being teenagers. I don't know what teenager wasn't like a certain way towards like having their younger siblings mixed into their circle of friends at the time.
And then I guess that brings us to a good discussion, which is like thinking before making decisions, right? Like thinking, going into it, reasoning every single aspect of the decision before you make it. So like I said in that story, I also never thought about, well, how would my sister feel about this, for instance? Like, or you never thought about why would Sharon do that? But as an adult, like when I bring that story in this discussion, like to Cat Talk, for example, we think about, okay, well, that's a bit extreme. Like, why would you even do that? So would you guys say the way you reason the outcomes of the decisions now, you are more considerate about the other person? Like, say if this decisions involves like two people, you and another person, are you more considerate about the outcome for the other person, or are you more considerate about the outcome for yourself? Like, is it more
even if I haven't been, because you gain experiences and you learn from them, but even like now, even if I'm going through something and I haven't experienced it, I feel like my like rationale, so to say, is better because of experiences, even if it's not related to what I'm going through. So I feel like I'm better at making decisions now than before, whether that's saving money or whether that is, you know, being more fit or making a purchase or whatever, you know. So I feel like my rationale has changed really in the better. So, and it's always progressing, which is great.
Daisy, I definitely think that is true. That like now making decisions, like a lot more goes into like making the decisions, like the outcome and how it would affect everybody else around me. But like I also said before, being a teenager, teenagers for some reason are really selfish in a way. It kind of like happens without, like, you kind of at the time you kind of think that you're not being selfish. Because I remember definitely not really putting into consideration like how my actions would affect other people, like your parents, for example. If you go out and like party or like, you know, scare them, like you think like, what is their issue, like, you know, but literally they're like,
you would think, oh, why are they being this way, or why are they being really strict to me? You know what I mean? Like you would think, oh, why are they being so strict? So why do they want to give you all the time? But it's like they're looking out for you. But from the perspective of a teenager, you're almost like very like concerned more about your own thoughts and like
and like you're trying to figure out like the whole teenage world and navigate.
Exactly, that you're not really seeing like where other people are coming from, or how your actions are affecting other people, or why your parents are saying certain things. Like you don't see it at the time as, oh, they're meaning to protect me. At the time, you're thinking about it like, oh, they just don't want me to like, be cool or something.
Yeah.
You know
so I mean? Thinking about it now, like my grandparents who have raised me into a good person, noble person, I try to think. But so thinking back to it, when I was younger, I was like going out late and I was partying and having parties when they were gone. Like I was a bad, you know, grandchild example. But I'm getting better, obviously. But like thinking back to it, like in the time, I would always cause like a headache for my grandparents. She's like, I'm, you know, too old to be having this. And at the time, I was like, well, it's okay, you know, it's not a big deal. But like her mental health was like, holy, like you gotta slow, like don't be so crazy. But you know, again at the time I was like, oh, whatever. But thinking back to it, I'm like, holy, I was
like, now you never do that.
I wasn't now I wouldn't do that for sure, you know. But at the time I wasn't thinking.
As a teenager, you're definitely always the subject of your story. It's definitely more I-based, more me-based, more why is the world against me.
It's like me versus the world, for sure.
Exactly. So speaking to that, I actually do want to hear a teenager's perspective. So I do want to hear from Kiera. How do you think your decisions right now how do you think your decisions right now come about? Do you think it's more, are you considerate, or do you think like, oh well, I'm that teenager, I'm advanced, I like, you know, I think about other people? We could be completely wrong, like, because this is definitely a personal subject. I'm sure there's teenagers out there who are not focused around themselves or centered around themselves. So what would you say to that? Do you think your decisions are more selfish towards you, or do you think you're more considerate around people around you, your family or the next person, and think about the outcomes of your decisions?
Both.
Both? What do you mean? Can you elaborate a bit more on both?
No, I don't really have opinion.
You don't have an opinion on your decision, or you don't have an opinion?
No.
Like, what do you mean? Oh, so you don't want to speak. So that's like,
Yeah.
it's the classic teenager, right?
Yeah.
So you're the classic example then of what we're speaking about. Your decision is more you focused than.
I guess.
There you go.
Well, it's also like we're all speaking in hindsight, right?
Yes.
Like, so you can't really ask her perspective of like,
right, she's living through it.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
She's living it right now.
She's like, I'm a teenager, just let me be. Okay.
She's like, I have to go watch Grey's Anatomy in 5 minutes. What are we doing?
Legit.
Watched that like 100 times.
Okay. So yeah, I do feel that was a beautiful discussion that we had about teenagehood and coming into your own as a teenager.